Hi everybody, it's Thomas here from Thomas Fitzgerald Photography and welcome to a lovely sunny day in Dublin City. Today I want to talk to you about this. It is the original Canon 5D Mark I. So I've had this camera for about 12 years. It was originally released in August 2005 and I think I got mine shortly thereafter, so it's going on 13 years. So one of the things I've always really liked about this camera is it feels very much like using a film camera. And part of that too is the fact that it is full frame. I think there's a lot of confusion around full frame at the moment, and I think part of that is because there's been a lot of misinformation put out by people online who don't really understand what full frame is all about. You get a lot of people saying, oh well, crop sensor cameras are just as good now, but it's never really about image quality. I mean, it is to an extent, but there is a certain look about full frame that is a combination of the sensor size and lenses and focal length. The depth of field you get in relation to the focal length is unique for full frame, and you get a certain look at that full frame look that you don't get with crop sensor cameras. Now you don't see this on every image, but on certain types of images you know it when you see it, and anyone who's used a full frame camera for a long time and likes that look, that you can only really get that with a full frame camera. There's nothing wrong with crop sensor cameras. Image quality wise, most modern cameras are brilliant. There's nothing to complain about, but again, it's just a different look. So with the 5D Classic, you're getting that look for a relatively inexpensive amount. I mean, if you think about it, probably the cheapest new full frame cameras are started around 2 grand. So with the original 5D, you're getting that for like €300. Obviously you'll need a lens with that as well, but even so, that's still a really good value. So while the 5D Classic is about 13 years old now, the image quality is still really good. Now obviously you can't really compete with kind of modern image sensors, but for the price you're getting really good image quality. When I look back through my image library too, I realized that many of my all-time favorite images that I've taken over the years were all taken with the original 5D. Like I said, there's something about the image quality. It's not even quality per se, it's just the look of the images are actually really nice. As again, there's something very filmic about it that I kind of like. It should be noted though, the camera is far from perfect. There is a couple of kind of fairly major issues with it. The first is that it is a dust magnet. When this came out, this was, again, as I said, it was the first consumer full frame camera, and there was no noise reduction, there was no, dust reduction technology built into this. So it basically, because of the larger sensor and the fact that it's not weather sealed as far as I know, you get a lot of dust on the sensor, especially if you're not careful changing lenses. When this came out, this was a bigger issue because, for start, Photoshop didn't have as good dust removal tools. It only had the clone stamp tool, it didn't have the spot healing tool, and Lightroom didn't have any dust reduction tool. So actually removing dust in software was a bigger issue than it is today. But even at that, you can actually get quite large particles of dust in this if you're not careful. And the other problem was too, it uses an oily mirror box, so there's actually oil in the mirror mechanism. So if you weren't careful when cleaning it, you could get oil on the sensor, and that required sending it off to get cleaned by an expert. Or you could do it yourself if you were really brave, but I tried doing it once and I nearly made it worse, so I ended up having to send it off to get fixed. Well, not fixed, it just needed to be cleaned. So that's kind of the one biggest drawback. The second drawback is the rear screen is crap, basically. In bright sunlight you can't really see it at all. In really bright sunlight it might as well not be there. That might be partly why it feels like using film. One other thing to note is there is no live view on this camera. This came out before live view was kind of invented. So I brought a couple of different lenses with me today, and I am going to go and do some shooting with this now. So I'm going to start off with this, which is the 100mm macro lens. This is the older macro lens. There's a newer version of this now that has IS in it, and this is the older version that doesn't. But this is actually a really good lens. This is actually one of my favorite lenses on any camera. It's super sharp, and it has absolutely beautiful bokeh, or however you pronounce that. So I'm going to go shoot some with this, and then we'll might change it up for a different lens and see how we get on. So one of the things to note about this camera is that the autofocus was kind of legendary for being not great. It has a 9 point, I think it's 9 point. Let me just look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yes, it has a 9-point autofocus system. but most of the points are kind of centered in the center of the frame, so it doesn't give you a particularly wide coverage, certainly compared to more modern cameras. If you're doing single point autofocus, it's okay. It has a tendency to be ever so slightly off, but you might need to get it calibrated. But again, depending on what you're shooting, it's generally fine. Okay, so I've been shooting in the park for a bit now, so let's go and try and see if we can do some street photography and do something a little different now. I'm going to use the 100mm for this, even though that's a big no-no in street photography purist terms. Out there you use a long lens, but I actually think you can get some interesting shots with this, so let's see how we get on. Okay, so I've been shooting with the 100mm for a while now, and I think it's time to kind of change things up a bit, so I'm going to switch lenses and I'm going to use the 17-40 f4L just kind of for a different perspective, see how we get on with that. So there you have it, that's what happened when I tried to do the review. Now, I should point out that even though I had problems with mine, the chances are you're probably going to be fine. This apparently was a well-known problem. I'd never heard of it, but Canon did actually do a recall and replaced a lot of the cameras that had this issue. So if you do want to get one secondhand, what I suggest you do is check the history of the camera from whoever you're buying it from. I believe this only affected some of the earlier models, so if it was bought kind of later in the production run of the original 5D, the chances are it's probably going to be fine. But again, it's just something to be aware of. You do need to be careful when you're buying second-hand cameras because you never know what's going to happen. It might be fine when you buy it, but you know, a couple of months after, or even a couple of days, or even as soon as you go out and shoot, you may end up having some kind of problem like this. So do a bit of research and check your source, check where it's been bought from, and yeah. So, but the 5D, as you can see, the review was going quite well before this, and the images from the 5D are still really, really good. There's a lovely, rich kind of color to them, and there's a really nice kind of filmic texture to the images as well. So, I still really like this camera, and while mine's broken now, I am going to try and get it fixed. I did another video where I talked about kind of everything that went wrong, and I'll have the link in the description below. But since then I've kind of done some research and a few people have been talking to me, so I'm going to try and fix it myself. I don't really have anything to lose at this point, so why not? So anyway, that was my almost review of the Canon 5D original, or Canon 5D Classic as some people like to call it. Still a great camera, and you can pick them up for about €300 now, so I hope you found this useful, and check out my other videos. Check out my Patreon feed if you think this is useful and you'd like me to do more things like this. And subscribe to my channel and like this video. Okay, thanks for watching, and see you next time.